Hello, Tom Lebecki here with the latest edition of the New Theory podcast. So now I reached out to my guest, Benita Alexander, after seeing he lied about everything. And guys and gals, this story is something else. Benita, welcome to the New Theory podcast. How you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
All right. So before we get into the crust of the documentary, give us your backstory. You were accomplished in media. You had a whole life, prior to this. Give us a little backstory and tell us who you were.
I've been a journalist for many years. I graduated with a degree in print. Always thought I would go into print, but ended up gravitating towards radio and television. Worked in local television, behind the scenes, on camera in Michigan. Okay. And then came to New York to work for NBC and spent 17 years there producing everything from investigative stories to, I worked with all the big talent at NBC, so had a very successful career.
Nice. So you're in media, kind of rocking and rolling, and you were married and you have a beautiful daughter, correct?
I do, yes.
Okay. So then unfortunately you lost your husband at the time.
Yeah, we had divorced in 2009, and very sadly, 2011, he was diagnosed with brain cancer, glioblastoma, which is the same one that McCain had. It's awful. Is really grim. No, they say most people don't make it past 2 years, and he died a little less than 2 years later. Really tragic.
So, sorry to hear that. And I used to work in pharmaceuticals, and we made a drug called Temodar, which helped with one of those. I think that particular one and a few other cancers. And the side effects of just the drug itself is almost as bad as the illness, but you're fighting for days. So my and our condolences there. So then obviously, you were divorced before, but it's still painful to your daughter's father. So then you're a single mother at that point. Mm-hmm. And then you meet a particular individual, but I don't want to kind of let you, Dr. Paolo. So, how did you meet him and give us a little bit, and let's assume people didn't see the documentary, so okay. See it. So let's give them enough, but definitely, give us a backstory how you met Dr. Paolo.
So I was assigned to work on a documentary about something called regenerative medicine, which is this very exciting field in medicine, which is kind of like science fiction, Frankenstein kind of stuff, where the idea is that eventually we would build new organs and body parts in the lab. You basically, something happens to you, you get sick, you get in an accident, you just go get a new body part from the lab.
Correct.
So very exciting field, a lot of potential, a lot of promise, a lot of hope. And I was assigned to work on a story about it. And we were following the case of this young Korean toddler who was going to be the youngest person in the world to get an artificial windpipe or trachea that was being made by this doctor who was nicknamed the super surgeon. And he was world-renowned, world famous, worked at the place that gives the Nobel Prize in medicine. Yeah. And so we started following this case and this doctor, and this is how I met this man.
Wow. So you being an investigative journalist, I'm assuming that, and him being the subject of a piece, you probably did some like precursor background in terms of who he was, what he did, and that kind of stuff. So when you initially researched him, was it more like, hey, this guy's great, I'm really excited to meet him? Or did it pique your interest like, wow, I hope he's single? How did that kind of...
No, initially not at all. I mean, I definitely was, as everybody was, kind of in awe of him. I mean, he was nicknamed the super surgeon. He had this reputation for being, he was kind of a rebel. He was kind of a cowboy. He was the guy that was pushing through barriers and pushing through medical frontiers and was willing to take the risks that nobody else was willing to take. And we need those people in medicine. You need people like that, who are going to push medicine forward. And so I was intrigued by that, but I certainly did not imagine that this was someone that was going to become part of my life.
So you meet, is it, and it's like, hey, like it's rap, hey, let's grab a cocktail or a rap party, or just usual, hey, let's email back and forth some post production notes. Like how did the personal relationship evolve at that point?
First, we were talking on the phone a couple of times and by email, all very professional. And then the first time that we interviewed him, he was in Boston speaking at a conference, and we went to do our first interview with him. And it was the craziest thing. And he came around the corner. I was sitting with a colleague in a restaurant waiting. And the second he came around, I've literally never had anything like this happen to me in my life. Our eyes locked, and something just happened. I mean, I felt like this chill go up and down my body. It was kind of a spark, and I had butterflies, and I thought, what the hell was that, you know? And I also thought, whatever that was, let it go, ignore it. Because it was the professional versus, I'm like, what is happening here? But yeah, there was some kind of instant connection, you know, and he's very charming. He's very, very charming.
And in fairness to him, one, he's not hard on the eyes. And
no, he's not.
We'll put a link. Number two, he's Italian, and I'm Italian, so I know how, like, even sometimes I get, like, snookered by Italians, just as je ne sais quoi, if you will. I'm using a French term, but just the way they are, you know, very different than, you know, Americans, very, like, almost touchy-feely, very open to, like, you know, when you meet Italians, it's like, wow, they're really, like, in tune with their emotions, which we're not used to as Americans. Yeah. So I see that, and he's a surgeon, which doesn't hurt. No. So you meet, you lock eyes, sorry, Siri went on, that's weird, sorry. So you lock eyes, you have, you know, connection. Was it mutual? Like, did you guys kind of, like, you know, have an affinity for?
I would find out later that it was. He would tell my friend. I didn't know that at the time. He told my friends later that he was instantly intrigued by me, and but I didn't know that until months later. We kept it very professional. And then what happened is this toddler was being operated on in Illinois, and so I was going back and forth to Illinois for her surgery. And at the time, my ex-husband was approaching the end, and things were just grim and difficult. And I was at a really in hindsight, a really, really vulnerable point. I mean, I knew my ex-husband was about to die. I knew my then 9-year-old daughter was about, you know, to lose her dad, and she was very much daddy's little girl. And it was on me to tell her somehow that her dad was going to die. I didn't know how to do that. And I didn't even know how to prepare myself for what was coming. And he initially seemed just like a very good friend. We would, at the end of shoot days, we would talk, we would go to dinner together. He's a really good listener. And I kind of poured my heart out to him, and he was a great friend. And I thought at the time, this really caring person that had taken this great interest in this little girl that he'd never met, and had really wise, sage advice. I mean, this was someone, you know, he's a surgeon. He's dealt with people dying all the time. And he gave me wonderful advice on what to tell her, when to tell her, how to tell her. So initially, we were friends. And I thought he was a pretty incredible human being, actually, you know, a really caring, altruistic person who actually cared about humanity.
Wow. And then, okay, so then as it evolved, let's say romantically, what was the logistics? You were in New York, he was in Sweden or Italy. Like, where was he? Where were you? How did you date? How did weekends, every the weekends? How did that all work?
So we after a little while became romantically involved. I sort of fell head over heels for him, and he was working all over the world. I'm based in New York, but he spent a lot of time in New York too. So I would see him at least twice a month, and we took trips all over the place. He flew me everywhere. It was very romantic. It was completely being swept off my feet. I mean, it was like Prince Charming walked in, which probably should have been my first sign, because there is no such thing as Prince Charming. But it felt like it. I was walking on clouds. He was incredibly generous, and he literally was dream man. He just seemed like dream man. He checked off every box you could ever want. There was nothing wrong.
So, and for those listening and those heard about your background, like knowing you a little bit, or knowing your background, it was probably hard for you to be awestruck, because you're probably around celebrities, you know, at Rockefeller Center every day. So it was almost like, you know, it's almost like, oh, great. But, you know, he actually, you know, went the distance to, hey, let's fly you here, or hey, I'm in New York, let's get together. So relationship, you know, we're all adults, relationships form. You guys get serious, and then he pops the question, you know, where did he do it and how did he do it?
That was actually very sweet and he tended to do everything very over the top. He was always surprising me. I mean, we'd go on trips and I'd walk in and the bed was covered in rose petals, and, you know, there's a heart in rose petals on the bed, to the point that every hotel we went to, the staff would pull me aside, like the women at the front desk or where'd you meet him? Does he have a brother? How do I get one of those? It almost got to be too much, actually. And my friends would be like hanging on the edge of their seats, waiting for me to come home from a trip. What did he do now? What did he do now? But his proposal it was our first Christmas together. It was quiet. It was just me, Paolo, and my daughter. We were at home, and I was sitting on the couch, and he handed me a box, which I didn't think anything of. And I opened it, and it was this gorgeous ring. Wow. And I was speechless, actually, because I wasn't expecting it at all. And it was really touching. It was very sweet. Felt very genuine. And I was elated. I was just elated. I was so happy. I thought he just seemed to be everything, and he was really good with my daughter, and she really liked him. And, not that anyone could ever fill her dad's shoes, but he certainly seemed like somebody that could step into that role and do it very well.
Yeah, because this, like when you date as a parent, it's not just like, hey, do I like you or do you like me? It's, are they going to get along with my daughter? Like,
exactly.
I'm introduced, what's the dynamic? And then when you break up, it's almost, I hate to say this, but it's almost like two breakups, right?
It's true. It's true. Yeah. Very true. Yeah.
As well as yours. So, but you guys got set the date. If I remember correctly, in the documentary, you were scheduled to get married in July. Was it the following year, or was it 2 years?
We got engaged December of 2013, and then the wedding was set for July 11th, 2015.
Okay, so
one of the reasons there was a delay is because when I met him, I knew that he was separated from his wife. Okay. He had an Italian wife that he'd been married to for many years. He said they were separated, and that he had a house in Barcelona, which I knew he did, and she lived in Italy, and they'd just never gotten divorced because of the kids, and they had 2 kids who were, late teens.
Little minor detail.
Yeah, but he said, when he claimed when he met me, now he had met the woman that changed his life, and he finally wanted to get divorced, and he filed for divorce, and it was August of 2014 when he told me the divorce went through. And after that, we began planning the wedding.
Well, for the record, in Italy, nothing goes that quick, especially divorces. But it's plausible. It sounds, we're reasonable people, right? To that point, it sounds plausible. So you got the ring. Hey, you're divorced officially. Because, you just need to have them unencumbered, right?
Yeah.
So you set the date for the following year. Mm-hmm. And this is the part where, the documentary, for me, goes from, 0 to 100. As crazy as it sounds, all reasonable things, right? I live in New Jersey. I'm in New York a lot. It's not, you meet a lot of outliers, right? So this, point, to me, you're both outliers, right? You're both going to be in those circles, so you're going to meet, going to fall in love. Take it as a compliment. Both very attractive people. All makes sense to me at this point, actually. Where it gets a little crazy is
what happens next.
The Pope himself was supposed to be you guys.
I know. It sounds, on the surface, it sounds insane. And I understand, actually, when people, if you just read that, she thought the Pope was marrying him. I understand why people go, oh, come on, really?
No, I'm not faulting you because he was such a badass.
Right.
It's almost it's probably not true, but if somebody's going to pull this off, it's going to be.
Right. But the setup was, so he insisted on having a Catholic wedding. He's Catholic, and he was very insistent on getting married in Italy. He wanted to get married in Tuscany, near where his mother lives, and he wanted this Catholic wedding. And from the beginning, I said, look, I'm not even Catholic, first of all, and what Catholic church is going to marry 2 divorcees?
Well,
I thought he was divorced.
But I know some churches, but at this point, still reasonable. All right, keep going.
Right. So it was this buildup, because then he said, well, I'm going to go and talk to different, and he supposedly spent, at least a week. He was on the phone with me every day, sending me pictures of different, churches and everything. And he kept saying he couldn't find a priest that he liked that would do it. So then he told me he was going to call in a favor to the Vatican. And he had told me, and a lot of other people, and I'd even seen it on a recommendation letter, that he had done work for the Vatican, which made sense because he was one of Italy's top cardiothoracic surgeons. And he said he was a consulting doctor to the Pope, which didn't sound that absurd. Somebody has to do that job, right?
Right.
And I had seen it in a letter, another doctor talking about how he'd done work for the Pope. So he claimed he was going to go to the Vatican and ask some people at the Vatican if they could help us find a priest that would be willing to marry us. And that's when things got nuts, because he called me. He goes to this meeting, and before he went, I said, who are you meeting with? And he said, Pope Francis. I'm like, come on, really? And he comes out of this meeting and he calls me and he said, I had this great meeting, great news. The Pope wants to help us. He's going to help us find somebody who will marry us. But what? And he said, but you need to sit down. You're not going to believe this. The Pope wants to marry us himself. And I called BS on him. I said, oh, come on, give me a break. The Pope doesn't marry people. And I actually hung up on him. I got so annoyed with him. I thought he was just playing a joke on me. But then I Googled it, and the Pope had actually just married about 20 couples at the Vatican, including couples that were quote unquote living in sin. So I thought, okay, maybe this isn't so ridiculous. And his story was that the Pope wanted to marry us because, this is a very progressive, forward-thinking Pope, as we know, who was breaking all kinds of barriers.
Correct.
And that he saw us as kind of the perfect poster couple to push this forward-thinking agenda, forward, and that he was going to use us as an example to marry two divorcees. So it's not as crazy as it sounds initially. And then he was very clever because it was cloaked in the utmost secrecy, right? If the Pope marrying two divorcees would be so controversial. And so, this would make worldwide news. This is huge. So everything had to be kept under wraps. I was sworn to secrecy. Everybody that we talked to was sworn to secrecy. And it was this big clandestine secret thing. I even had people sign non-disclosure agreements. So that was, in hindsight, the perfect setup. And then my life was
really quick though, Benita, because that's interesting because as you know, and you probably did a ton of research afterwards, is a con person needs to make something believable and give something that's almost like a stretch, but then almost like says, okay, we have to keep this as an NDA because he can't be out public until it happens. And
exactly,
as crazy as it sounds, like I'm still subscribed now. I'm still like, hey, when am I getting my invite? I'm flying out to Alabama. So okay, so then you started like doing invites and all that kind of fun stuff.
And so people knew that it was a big wedding. Only people very closest to me knew that it was the Pope. What most people knew was that a lot of celebrities were coming and a lot of world leaders, which also made sense given the work he did. He worked in Sweden at the place that gives a Nobel Prize in medicine. He was doing a clinical trial in Russia, and he was connected to all these, big world leaders and dignitaries supposedly, and people at the top of their profession in, both the medical and scientific arenas. So it was turning into this big glamorous, like, wedding of the century.
Now, and that's where I found interesting in the day of social media, and he struck me as a guy who's been running around doing selfies, but in the day of social media and the day of kind of, a little more transparency, like, would he have pictures of him and Andrea Bocelli? Would he have pictures with him and these celebrities that were Bill Clinton, et cetera, was supposed to be on the list? Or was it more lip service afterwards?
It was mostly stories and lip service. And it's funny you said that because I asked him a number of times if he had pictures. And these guys are so good. He just always had the perfect excuse, and everything sounded plausible. Anytime I would question anything, and I didn't have any major doubts until the end, but anytime something seemed a little bit off and I questioned it, he was like, bam, he had the answer right away. So you always know what to say.
So it brings you to, okay, so we're looking for a July 15 target date. What is the first incident or was it a twinge, something you found? What was the first discrepancy? Pink flag, red flag, what was it and what happened?
There were probably a few little pink/red flags before that I kind of ignored. I think we just do. I was in a love haze and I didn't want to see it. Nothing really, really overt. He was having some trouble professionally. He had been accused of scientific misconduct in Sweden. That was the first big thing. That was about 6 months before the wedding, and it was in the New York Times, and that's how I found out about it. I had to read about it in the New York Times, and I was really angry. And I sort of said to him, "Why didn't you tell me what was going on?" His explanation for that was that he is this radical pioneer, and that people wanted to take him down. People were jealous, and that when you're at the forefront of anything, and you're the rebel pushing through barriers, people do get jealous, and which actually makes sense. Yeah. and that this was all just, he was being unfairly maligned. And I believed him, you know, I supported him. I did what any loving partner would do, and I tried to help him through it. But that changed the dynamic of our relationship. And then there were little things he had told me that he wanted, which is again, the perfect setup. He wanted to surprise me with everything at the wedding. All I was supposed to do was buy my dresses and show up, basically. And he was doing all the planning. And this was a point of contention at the beginning because I'm a producer. I'm somewhat of a control freak and a woman. I wanted to plan my own wedding, but all my friends said, you know, look, this man has amazing taste. He's always surprising you. For once in your life, Benita, like, sit back and let someone just take over. And it was a struggle for me at the beginning, but I did. And again, that was a perfect setup. So anytime I would have normally asked questions, I kept telling myself, okay, he wants to surprise you. Don't ask any questions. And he would tell me enough, but not go into detail. But towards the end, I kept asking if I could talk to the wedding planner. And he just, you know, it was one excuse after the other. And I thought that was odd. And then there were some other little things, but nothing major.
Interesting.
And then this was a killer. I quit my job, you know, after 17 years at this network television job. I quit my job. I pulled my daughter out of her private school where she'd been since kindergarten. Very difficult school to get into, especially in New York.
Yeah.
And I was preparing to ride off into the sunset with him. I thought the plan was that we were going to go and live at his house in Barcelona. He sat in front of my daughter and talked about the school he had enrolled her in Barcelona and described all these things about her life in Barcelona. I mean, so much was at stake. I was basically giving up everything for this man, something I never thought I would do. And we were, I think it was 8 weeks out from the wedding. It was, it was May 13th, exactly. The day after I left NBC, my last day at work. I went to the spa with a group of girlfriends. I was struggling a little bit. I mean, I just left this very prestigious career, and it was a big move. And I came out of the spa and I had an email from a colleague that simply said, the subject line was the Pope. And in this email, it said that Pope Francis was not going to be in Italy on July 11th. He was going to be in South America. Yeah. And that this was a trip that had been planned for quite some time. And in that instant, it would take me months to fully understand and comprehend what was going on. But in that instant, I knew. I almost literally fell on the ground. I felt sick. I just felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. Somehow, whatever little red flags had been nagging at me that I had been trying to suppress, in that instant, I just knew.
It was like an avalanche. So was your strategy to confront him or catch him? Like, 'cause I know, and I have some questions about the Barcelona trip, but before we get there, what was your strategy at that point?
Initially when I confronted him about it, obviously he I said to him, is this all a lie? What's going on? And he had as he always did, one excuse after the other. And his excuse, without getting into too much detail, was that the Pope had been undermined by Pope Benedict, the other living Pope, who's very, very conservative, and that he did not want Francis doing something so controversial as marrying two divorcees, which again makes sense. And that Benedict had gone behind his back to make it so that the Pope could not do this, that this could not happen. And he had basically sent him to South America. Yeah. And Paolo promised he was going to fix it, and he was rushing to Rome. He was getting on a plane, rushing to Rome. He was going to take care of everything. I didn't believe him at all at that point. But I decided to kind of play a cat and mouse game with him because I knew he was lying. I had no idea the extent to which he was lying. But until I got all the information, I didn't want him to catch on that I was onto him. So, it was sort of like in a second, I woke up out of this dreamy love haze and put my journalist hat back on and went into investigative mode. And it was rough for a couple months. I had to keep telling him by phone that I loved him, and while I'm investigating him. And I hired 2 private investigators, one here and one in Italy, and then started my own investigating and canceled the wedding. I canceled the wedding, which is important because I'm not sure. I don't know what would have happened if I didn't cancel that wedding.
Aside for the obvious, and again, I want to talk a little bit about the Barcelona trip in a second, but what was the most shocking item, and there was a lot of them, but the most shocking item that, and if you get a stateside investigator, Italy investigator, so out of those two investigations, what was the most shocking thing that was unearthed? That even for this crazy story, you were like, holy shit. Like, what was like the biggest bombshell of what you found out during those investigations? I know there's a lot. So let's choose.
I mean, it was just everything. The whole thing was a lie. Literally everything was a lie. This wedding was never going to happen. It was all some sick fantasy he had played in his head. You know, all these things that he said were booked, you know, everything, the caterer, the castle where he sat in front of all my friends and my family and told them he had rented this castle for everybody to stay in. People had bought plane tickets. I mean, he took this thing so far. People had booked hotels. People had purchased fancy, you know, black tie, red carpet gowns because they thought they were going there. It was a whole weekend of events. And, you know, I mean, we were 6 weeks out from the wedding and none of it was real. None of it was real.
6 weeks before. I thought it was earlier for some reason. Wow.
No. And so it was 6 weeks before when I canceled the wedding.
Still.
But nothing about the wedding was real. And then he was still married. He never got divorced. So he never could have legally married me in the first place.
Wow.
So those were the two initial big killers that just, the whole thing was a lie. And then he never could have married me in the first place. He was playing some kind of game with me. And then what I found in Europe when I went myself.
Yeah, tell us about the Barcelona trip, because I think that's like the apex of the documentary. I mean, the documentary, you guys got to say, we'll put a link, but I think that was the apex. So walk us through that trip. And I just got to ask, the biggest question was, why didn't you go to the door? So let's go through what happened. And I was just wondering why you didn't confront them. That was my only question I wanted to ask you.
So on what was supposed to be my wedding day, July 11th, I flew to Italy.
It was your wedding day?
Yeah. By myself. I got on this plane by myself, had a glass of champagne, and because a lot of people, everybody had bought plane tickets. So a lot of my friends decided to still go to Italy to make a trip out of it. I mean, at least I wasn't sending them to Iowa or something. And so I asked a group of my girlfriends if they would meet me. And I said I wanted to do my own investigating. Partly I wanted to go, it was partly a girls' trip, and partly it was I wanted to see all the places I was supposed to go and this fantasy I was supposed to live out. And I wanted to see for myself. And my investigators had found out some information. It's very difficult to get into court records in Italy. Like it took the Italian investigator a while to find out that he was still married. Yeah. And I just knew, because he had flown me all over the world, all these beautiful trips, you know, Greece, Bahamas, Russia, so many places. He never took me to the house in Barcelona, and he always had an excuse. Every single time I was supposed to go to Barcelona, there was an emergency surgery. And we had actually argued about that a lot in the last 3 months before the wedding, because I kept saying, who the hell marries a man without seeing the house where they're going to live? This makes no sense.
What about furniture? What's going on? What's a mailing address? What's going on? Yeah.
Right. So I knew he was hiding something in that house. I just knew he was. I didn't know what it was, but I knew he was hiding something. And I knew the only way I was going to find out what it was to go there, and to go there when he didn't know I was going there. So we were still communicating at that point. I had canceled the wedding under the guise that the scientific misconduct investigation was getting out of hand, which it was, and he was too stressed, and let's just postpone the wedding. So it was kind of the perfect excuse. And I told him on our wedding day, I actually lied to him, and I told him I had gone upstate New York with some girlfriends because I was upset. I couldn't handle the wedding day, so he had no idea I was in Europe. I went with two girlfriends, two of my best friends, to Barcelona. The first killer was the address that he had given me for the house, which I had given to people to mail us wedding gifts, was a bogus address. It didn't exist. So that was my first clue. So I find the right address. So he doesn't even know I have the right address. And we go to this house, and because I wasn't sure what I was going to find, I put this hideous blonde wig on, just because I wanted to disguise myself in case I didn't know what I was going to find there. I fully expected to find another woman there. And we even had pictures on all of our phones of his wife and a couple other women that I suspect he was having affairs with. I was prepared for that. And he was lying. He told me by text that morning that he was in Russia. So he's in theory in Russia. He doesn't know I'm coming to the house. we go to the house. When we first got to the house, he lives at the top of this hill in the seaside community in Barcelona. I stayed in the car because I wanted my friends to see what was going on first, and I was videotaping on my cell phone. And the first thing was they go to the door and I see him come down the stairs. So right away I lose it in the car and I'm swearing up a storm because he had told me he was in Russia, and he's not in Russia. He's there. And I can't hear what they're saying, but I can see this conversation happening. Doesn't last very long. And they handed him a gift, a bottle of wine. This is the plan we came up with, that whoever answered the door, that they were going to say, which was true. They had just come to Italy because they had tickets for this wedding and they wanted to leave a gift for this, wedding that never happened. So I see him take the bag and I see them walking back up the hill. And as they're walking back up the hill and I'm screaming and swearing, he takes the wine they just gave him and throws it in the garbage can across the street. And then goes inside. But before that, and the reason I didn't go to the house is, as I'm up top of this hill videotaping, watching and screaming and crying, I see two little kids run across the porch, and then a woman. And it was the kids. I expected to see a woman. I did not expect to see children. And they were young kids, and they were happily playing in the pool and yelling at him, calling him dad. And it just froze me. He had a whole nother family in his house, and this is not his Italian wife. So in this house.
That's what I was like, kind of, it wasn't even her. It was like another, like.
This is another family altogether. And I would find out later that there was another family as well. So in addition to me, he had at least three other families.
Wow. Okay.
So that's why I didn't go to the house. Up until I saw the kids, I was getting ready to get out of the car and walk down the hill and confront him. Once I saw those kids, I couldn't. I mean, and we're all moms, and those are innocent kids that have. My beef is with him. It's not with that woman, not with those kids, and I just couldn't do it.
So what happened next?
I broke down completely in the car, which you see in the film. At that point, I'd had moments where I had cried, I had broken down, but at that moment, it just all hit me, and I just lost it. I'm just wailing in the car. I'm just wailing, and it's hard for me to even listen to now. And my friends wanted to get me out of there to calm me down, and we went to a restaurant, and I decided to text him. And I basically wrote this long text about this long, telling him that I know everything. I know he's lying about everything, calling him despicable and everything else. And I can't believe he did this. I can't believe he did this to my daughter. You're a horrible human being. He writes back one word. Wow. He writes back, wow.
Oh, yeah, remember that.
That's literally all he said. Wow. Like, wow, I've been caught.
You know what's interesting about people like that? Like, they're dead to rights, right? You got him.
Yep.
And you almost expect a rational response, like, sorry.
Yes.
I've told you. They continue to act wrong.
Like they did nothing wrong.
And that just makes you fucking nuts. It's so it is not that you were okay, but okay, hey, I got you. And then she'd be like, hey, okay, you got me, right? No, wow. And then now you're really pissed because you're now you're not even sorry. So and then he was dealing with a lot of stuff. You had to finally get that what the truth was. Have you ever spoke to him since?
So that was obviously 2015. That was right just days after we were supposed to get married. And then in 2018, I made this film for Discovery which aired on Valentine's Day, premiered on Valentine's Day of 2018, called He Lied About Everything. And in the making of that film, I tried to find him. I traveled to Sweden and Russia.
Russia, yeah, remember that hotel? Yeah. I remember that, yeah.
Some other places. And when I couldn't find him, I called him for the film. And to my surprise, he picked up. It was a very interesting conversation. It wasn't long. Yeah. And I had to tell him that I was recording him, so it didn't last long because of that. But initially when I called, it was the weirdest thing. So this was, I guess, 2017 when I made the phone call. So it had been 2 years. And he immediately, he has this very sort of soft, soothing voice. It's part of the charm. And he immediately went into this voice. And I think he thought I was calling to reconcile. It was nuts because I could immediately feel him. How are you? You know, and it was sickening. And then, you know, I can't remember exactly what I said to him. And he said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And I said, what are you sorry for? You know, for lying to me about everything, for creating a fake wedding, you know, for lying to my friends, my family, for, you know, upending my life, my daughter's life. Yeah. I'm sorry. He just said, I'm sorry. And it was like, it was a robotic, hollow, empty apology. It wasn't a real apology. I think he knew in his head, okay, I'm supposed to say I'm sorry, so I'm going to say I'm sorry. And that's all he said.
So consistent with his dishonest ways, it appears that he was also uncovered in the medical community for some behavior that was just not so great. Sorry, what walk us through that a little bit too, because I think that's a big
well, I mean, when I came home from Europe and I had found this other family in this house where I thought I was living happily ever after, trust me, I wanted to crawl under the bed and stay there. It was embarrassing. It was humiliating. It was painful as hell. I mean, I'm an investigative journalist. I'm the last person on the planet that's supposed to get conned, and I just got conned. And all my friends and family were caught up in this. My daughter, I mean, it was horrible. And my heart was broken, and so much was at stake. I'd given up everything. So now I'm the single mom with no job, no income coming in. My whole life has been torn apart. And I wanted to fall apart, but I couldn't. I couldn't because I have a daughter who needed me. And I had no evidence of it at the time, but I thought, if he's lying to me this outrageously, you know, saying he knows all these celebrities and the Pope is marrying us and all this nonsense, he must be lying in his medical and professional life. And this is a man who has people's lives in his hands. You know, this is a doctor. That means people's lives could be at risk. That means people could die. And that was terrifying and so horrifying to me that I thought, I have to do something about this. I felt an obligation to do something about it. I thought at the time I might be the only person that had the information or had the guts to stand up and expose him. And I just thought, this man needs to be exposed. This is frightening. And so that's the reason I decided to go public, which wasn't easy. Going public is no picnic. You know, it opens you up to all kinds of nasty haters and comments and people who want to make snap judgments without knowing the whole story. And I had to air my whole, you know, it's like unzipping myself and just, you know, and it was hard. But when I first went public, which was first a magazine article in the beginning of 2016, before I made my film, at the same time, the scathing documentary came out in Sweden. They had been following him for a while and investigating his medical work. And the two things happened at the same time. And then it was just everything fell like a house of cards. Basically, bottom line is this artificial trachea that he had been putting into people didn't work. It seems like he knew it didn't work. He never did the scientific experiments that you're supposed to do before you do an experimental procedure on a human being. He basically used his patients as human guinea pigs. There were 8 people worldwide that got this this groundbreaking, revolutionary artificial trachea. 8 people, 7 of them are dead. The only one that's still alive had the thing taken out. It doesn't work. Wow. So he was, and there are all kind of investigations. He was fired from Karolinska, where they give the Nobel Prize in Medicine. People on the Nobel Prize committee stepped down in shame. I mean, he fooled so many people, some of the world's top doctors and scientists. And he's now facing, it's taken a little while, but he's facing charges of aggravated assault in Sweden in connection with the deaths of 3 of his patients.
Well, so to be candid, you know, like when you see these documentaries, you always kind of want evil to lose. I mean, we're all good people, right? And it was a little unfulfilling because what I gathered from it is he got some charges, and then I went, of course, going to Wikipedia, etc. And like, I think he was like got a short sentence and he's out, or like, where's he now? Because like that's part of the reason I want to have you on. Like, how does it resolve?
Initially, Sweden looked into it, and this was in my film, and they dropped the charges, which is so disappointing. Although it is complicated because these are experimental procedures, so it's very difficult to prove that somebody did something intentionally or that they knew the patient was going to die. And he hid behind that.
Yeah.
These are very sick patients who were going to die anyway, is his excuse. And it's very difficult to prove that he knew that this thing wasn't going to work. What you can prove, however, is that he didn't do the scientific experiments, which is, like I said, using humans as guinea pigs, which is unacceptable and so egregious. And Sweden, this was so embarrassing for Sweden. They're a very proud country. This is a very prestigious institution, and so many people had been fooled by this man. And they took this very hard and very seriously. And so they reopened the investigation, and it took them 2 years. And it was just last month that they announced that they're charging him with aggravated assault. So I think they've been very meticulous this time. And this time there will be a trial. And I hope he goes to jail.
And is he in Sweden facing it? Is he like hiding out in Brazil? Like, where the heck is he?
I don't know where he is. I mean, the rumor is that he's been in Turkey, which makes sense because he has allies in Turkey. I don't know where he is. I don't know if they'll extradite him. On the other hand, the man is so arrogant, as many of these sociopathic con men are. They're such narcissists. He may just show up because he doesn't think he did anything wrong. And he may show up in court because he thinks he can get away with it. They always think they can get away with it.
Wow. So this story's not even done.
No.
So, and unfortunately, you have some experience with this. What are some of the what do you look at? Like, so somebody's in a relationship, they suspect something's awry. What are some of the things somebody should look out for? Pink flags, red flags. You ignore pink flags. Like, walk us through kind of like some sage advice to prevent this from happening to anybody else.
You know, in a way, they're very simple, but we don't do them because we get so caught up in love. And, you know, and I always say to women, it's not a crime to fall in love. You know, women blame themselves. And I'm really on this mission now to stop this stigma and stop women from feeling like they have to be shamed into silence because they're embarrassed by this. You know, it's not your fault. You know, these guys they're criminals. They're master manipulators. They're predators. They study their prey. They target, I mean, I think back to how vulnerable I was at the time. They tend to target women who are very vulnerable for one reason or another. It could be anything. It could be a death in the family. It could be a job loss, anything you're going through in your life that makes you vulnerable. So that's one of the first things I tell women is if you're going through something in your life that makes you vulnerable, you have to be hyper vigilant. You have to protect yourself because you're more susceptible to be conned. You're more susceptible to be pulled in by somebody like this because they know how to manipulate you. Another thing is that's a giant red flag is they tend to move very fast. You know, I mean, he was saying, I love you within no time and that he wanted to marry me within no time. And, you know, it takes time to get to know somebody, right? In a relationship and build a relationship normally. So if they're moving at lightning speed, that's a red flag. They tend to want tons of information from you because they're pulling information because they become exactly what you want. They become your dream man. So to do that, they ask you tons of questions. They want to know all kinds of things, but they don't reveal much about themselves. They're very guarded about giving you information. That's a red flag. The huge one, and it's a little different for me because it was all the way in Barcelona. Yeah. You have to see where this person lives. You have to see their home surroundings. If someone you are dating will not let you see where they live, there's a reason. They're hiding something, I promise you. You know, so that's a giant red flag. And those are just a few of them. And also money. I mean, my guy wasn't after money, but if someone you're just getting to know wants money from you, run. You don't, you know, you're not the bank. You don't give a stranger money ever, you know.
What's interesting is my experience has been typically the people run the guise of having a lot of money and intermittently offer, it's like a slot machine, offer intermittent reinforcement. Like they'll give you that one trip or they'll give you a hotel stay or go up in a nice car. So you think, you know, they have money and they come up with some plausible excuse. Oh, this insurance didn't pay this $350,000 surgery. I need $3,500. Just, you know, they're smart and then they bilk you for it. So those, I agree with you on that. And it's kind of interesting what they go after, motivations. But some silver lining. So you kind of got your career back on track. I saw online and I saw a documentary.
Yep.
How did you kind of re-engage your workplace and what are you doing now?
So after I made my film, I wasn't expecting this actually, but a lot of women started reaching out because it's Discovery and it airs all over the world. So a lot of women started reaching out to me and not just women, some men too, thanking me, which was very humbling. Wow. But they thanked me for being brave enough and courageous enough to sort of open myself up and tell my story. And they thanked me for making them feel less stupid and less alone. And I heard from so many people that I realized, wow, there's really a need for us to talk about this, and to stop women, like I said earlier, stop women from feeling like they have to hide under the covers and be ashamed and embarrassed, because it's not our fault. And I think these con men count on that. If we're quiet and we don't talk, this perpetuates. This is how this continues. They bank on us being too embarrassed to say anything. And that's why this keeps going. So I first made a documentary for Oxygen about another one of these guys in 2019. And then that's all I do now, is I'm helping other women expose the men who con them. I become a quote unquote love con expert. I'm on Dr. Oz all the time. And the story was just on ABC, so I have more people reaching out to me. And I have something in the works which hasn't been announced yet, but which involves me very actively helping other women expose the men who con them.
That's awesome. It just seems like, it probably took a lot of time. If we talked to you even 2 years ago, it's probably much different.
Oh yeah. It's been 5 years, and I would say it's taken 5 years, but I'm finally back on my feet financially. I finally feel like, I'm fully back to myself. It's been hard. It's been a journey. It hasn't been easy at all.
And God bless, because, and I'm saying God bless because I had traumatic things happen over the last 4 or 5 years. And then 6 years ago when we lost our mother. So like a lot of bad things happened. And really, at the time, what resonated with what you said earlier is at the time, you didn't know you were vulnerable. So like the people watching this, like sometimes when crappy things are happening, like you don't even realize. And then afterwards, like, holy shit, what just happened?
Exactly.
So, one of the things that helped me was like, today's really bad. It'll get a little better tomorrow. The week after that'll be best. The week after that'll be best. So kind of to wrap things up, what's some of your advice, somebody who's watching, who's maybe struggling with something right now, maybe betrayal and the like?
First of all, you're stronger than you think, and you can get past this. And for me personally, I felt very strongly that I did not want to give this man the power of changing me or changing the essence of who I am or making me bitter or angry, because then he wins. He'd already done enough damage. And so I was absolutely determined to still be me. And, I still believe in love. I'm still a hopeless romantic. None of that has changed.
That's awesome.
And talking about it is really important, not feeling so ashamed and not feeling like you have to hide, and to know that there are lots and lots and lots of other women out there who are going through the same thing you are and who have experienced the same thing you have. And they're smart, successful, intelligent women. These are not stupid women. This happens to intelligent women all the time. Unfortunately, particularly with the prevalence of online dating, this is just proliferating. This is a breeding ground for them. They target women. And lean on your friends, lean on other people. And I think it helps to watch other stories and see what other women have gone through. I hear that from women all the time. I was just talking to some women last night for a new story I'm working on, and it's just that sense that you're not alone and you're not stupid. This is not your fault. And it's not a crime, again, to fall in love. That's just not a crime. And it's not a crime to want to trust the person you love. So you didn't do anything wrong.
Wow. That's amazing. And just an amazing person, amazing story. I appreciate you getting back to me and being on the show. How can we find you, Benita?
The best place is on Instagram. It's at loveconned, all one word. So LOVECONNED. And you can send me a message there and follow everything that's happening now. I have a lot of different things going on. So, and it's funny. I didn't imagine myself on this path, but it somehow makes it all make sense that maybe this was supposed to happen to me, because I did have the means as a journalist to expose him and to turn this around into something where I can actually help other people now. So that part of it feels good. It's nice.
And I like that, people say, oh, I don't want this to happen to anybody else, but you actually took time to do it. So I'll put a link to the ID discovery below. And Benita, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And for what it's worth, you're an inspiration, and just, keep being you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.